Not gonna be a one night stand. I wanna be around a long, long time. Ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah. Turn the heat down, cool it. Ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah. Turn the heat down, cool it. Slow, low, low, slow, low, low, slow, low, 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 burn. Ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah. Turn the heat down, cool it. My first day on earth, I fell into your eyes. Look at how our galaxies collide. Every color of the spectrum, every star up in the sky. The planets align for you and I've known you since the dawn of time. With twin flames burning bright, and I can't believe that I finally found you. 'Cause nothing is better than you and I together. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. Lay here forever, you and I together. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. My first day on earth, you sang me a tune. Forever won't be long enough with you, and I'll never let you go. I'll never say goodbye. Together for eternity. Oh, I've loved you since the dawn of time. With twin flames burning bright, and I can't believe that I finally found you. 'Cause nothing is better than you and I together. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. Lay here forever, you and I together. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. You and I will be fine. We belong together. You and I will be fine. We belong together. You and I will be fine. We belong together. You and I will be fine. We belong together. Nothing is better than you and I together. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. Lay here forever, you and I together. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. 'Cause nothing is better than you and I together. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. Lay here forever, you and I together. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. I just wanna stay until the morning sun. My first day on earth, I fell into your eyes. Look at how our galaxies collide.
So I spent most of my days thinking life was a dream. Mistook the walls in my room for the clouds and the trees. So fill your head full of feeling, your heart full of life's a long time to waste. So get out of your head and get swept away. And life's a long time to waste. So I spend most of my evenings watching other people live my dreams. They're painting pictures on the back of my eyes from the light of a TV screen. So fill your hair full of dreams, your heart full of doubt, and all.
For record-keeping purposes, if you wish to make a statement regarding any item on the agenda, please complete the form located at the entrance or at the rear of the council chambers and deposit it with the Planning and Housing Commission Secretary. Good evening and welcome to tonight's Planning and Housing Commission meeting. Commissioner Alexander will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Communications from the public. Persons wishing to address the Planning and Housing Commission are requested to state their name for the record. This portion of the agenda is intended for public comment. State law prohibits the Planning and Housing Commission from discussing or taking actions on items not listed on the agenda. The Planning and Housing Commission will appreciate your cooperation in keeping your comments brief. Please observe a 3-minute limit to communications. Ms. Capella, did we receive any speaker cards or written comments from the public for any item not on tonight's agenda?
Chair Sequelan, we did not receive any speaker cards or written comments.
Thank you. First item is meeting minutes, approval of minutes for the Planning and Housing Commission meeting of November 7th, 2022. Ms. Capella, did we receive any speaker cards or written comments from the public regarding the November 7th minutes?
Chair Sequelan, we did not.
And do we have a motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved. I make a motion to approve the minutes.
And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Woody, second. And if you'd please vote. And the motion minutes pass. Our first item is a public hearing item. Public hearing are items that have been publicly advertised for review and considered by the Planning and Housing Commission. The first public hearing item is for TTM 38277, a tentative track map application to subdivide 34.27 acres into 13 numbered lots for the development of 118 residential condominium units and 19 lettered lots for private streets, open space, and private parks, located south of Bedford Canyon Road and Hudson House Drive, west of Interstate 15, in the medium-density residential parks and open space designation within the Arantine Hills Specific Plan. Applicant is Brian Milich of Pacific Ventures Management, LLC. Sandra Yang, our senior planner, will present this item. Ms. Yang, if you'd please proceed.
Thank you. With the Planning Commission's permission, I would like to present items 2 and 3 together as they are associated.
Absolutely. So that, then Lowell announced that second item. The second item that will also be presented will be public hearing item PP 2022-002, a precise plan application to review the site plan, architecture, landscaping, and fencing associated with the development of 118 residential condominium units and 2 private parks located again at Bedford Canyon Road and Hudson House Drive, west of Interstate 15. The applicant again is Brian Milich of Pacific Ventures LLC. If you can present both items, and then we'll handle both items separately for public comment and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. On tonight's agenda, we have items 2 and 3, and these are associated with the proposal to develop 118 detached condominium homes. These are proposed on 34.27 acres. The development also includes 2 small neighborhood parks, open space, amenities, slopes, and trails. The project site is located within the Bedford community, which is located on the west side of Interstate 15, south of Eagle Glen Parkway. The Bedford community is a 325-acre master plan residential and commercial development that is being constructed in phases under the Arantine Hills Specific Plan. The phasing of the community to date has included the approval of 883 units and a 21.7-acre commercial retail center. The project site that is being presented before you tonight is located on the eastern portion of the community, south of the Bedford Wash. The applicant of the request tonight is Pacific Ventures. They are the successor to the New Home Company, which was the original master builder of the community. Pacific Ventures is now the master builder, and they are responsible for constructing all the backbone infrastructure as well as obtaining all the land use entitlements for each residential phase within the community. Pacific Ventures is now ready to develop the next phase within the community, and that is the application, that is the proposal that is being presented to you tonight. This project requires the approval of 2 land use entitlements. One is a tentative track map, and the other is a precise plan. The tentative track map is a request to subdivide the project site into 13 lots, and this is intended to accommodate the 118 homes. The map also proposes to create 19 lots, and this will contain all the private streets that are proposed within the development, including the open space and the private parks. The precise plan includes several details, including the site plan of the development, the product type details, the landscaping, and the fence and wall details of the proposal. In the next several slides, I will be briefly going through each element of this proposal. The site plan is designed to accommodate the 118 detached homes, which will all be separated by fencing. The streets within the development are all proposed as private streets, but will allow for on-street parking. Access to this development will be by a bridge over the Bedford Wash, which the developer is currently constructing. The entire development will be surrounded by open space, and this includes slopes, trails, and amenities. And there will be 2 centrally located parks located within the center of the development. There are 6 different floor plans that are being proposed. They range from approximately 1,500 square feet to 2,700 square feet. Each unit has its own 2-car garage with a driveway and access to the private street. There is a mixture of 1- and 2-story homes, and there are 5 different architectural styles that are being proposed. The floor plans and our architectural design comply with the design guidelines imposed by the Arrington Hills Specific Plan. The development will be fully landscaped per the landscape requirements of the specific plan. This includes all the front yards of the units, all the side yards that are outside of the perimeter walls, the slopes, the open space, and the parks. Amenities include 2 centrally located parks, which is identified as the linear park on the plans that are in your staff report. There is also an additional park that is located along the north perimeter of the development, along the bluff of the wash, and this is identified as the bluff. This area contains picnic tables, fire pits, trails, seated areas, and gardens. And then private trails are proposed throughout the site. They run along the bluff, along the wash, and then along the freeway, down to the south end of the site, and through the 2 linear parks. This is the applicant's fence and wall plan. The plan proposes to construct block walls along the side yards of all the units where the walls face the streets. All the internal fencing will be constructed as 6-foot-high vinyl fencing. And then for the lots that are back or side onto the freeway, they are required to have a 6-foot-high sound wall in order to mitigate freeway noise. And then again, all the fences and walls comply with the specific plan requirements. The Planning and Development Department recommends that the Planning and Housing Commission approve the 2 applications tonight. And that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I am available. The applicant is also available for questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Before we open public hearing, let's move to the commissioners with questions for staff. And we'll start with the tentative track map item first, if we would. I'm sorry, Ms. Alexander.
I don't have any comments for staff. Thank you.
Okay. Any other staff questions on the TTM? Mr. Woody?
Yeah, I have a question. So this item is labeled TTM application to divide into 13 lots for the development of 118 residential condominium units and lots for private streets, open space, and park. So the thing I'm not quite getting, though, if we're subdividing it for condominiums, but these don't really look like condominiums. Can you explain that?
Sure, of course. So the lots, if you look at the map exhibit, the lots are much larger. They're not like your typical single-family lot. They're much larger, and within each lot will be multiple units. The units are detached. They will be separated by fencing, so that the fencing creates their exclusive use area, which would be like your side yards, rear yards, front yards. So when you look at it, when it's all done, and it looks like a typical single-family home with their own private yards, but they're actually condominium homes with exclusive use areas separated by fencing.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, Mr. Whitty, good question, because I was thinking the same thing. So what is the benefit of that versus considering an individual detached home? Is there purpose for that?
I would ask that the applicant respond to that, because that is his proposal to the city in terms of the benefits of doing a condo map versus individual lots. I will say that in this case, when you have a condo map, that parcel is owned in common ownership among the people that basically habit the buildings within that lot. And so the streets, the private streets, the utilities are all under that lot and under common ownership. And so that is kind of how the condo concept works. But each owner would have their exclusive use areas, which basically appear to someone on the street as a single-family residence. And they are, in fact, single-family residents. They just are owned as a condo rather than a fee.
All right, so when we move to public comment, we can have the developer speak to that. The other question I had is in the staff report, there was a comment that in the Project and Environmental Committee had some additional information that was required, and then it appears that that was satisfied. I'm just curious what that additional item or items were, if you're aware.
Yes, they were missing information on the plans. Sometimes details are left out, and so when we're going through all these plans, we're looking to make sure that all the details comply with minimum code requirements. So we were looking to make sure that everything was complete from a code requirement standpoint.
Great, thank you. Any other staff questions? All right, if that, let's move to public hearing. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And we did receive 2 speaker cards. Let's see, make sure we have the correct ones here. Our first item would be from Mr. Dwight Woodward. Mr. Woodward, you're welcome to come down.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's going to be connected to Bedford Wash on the south side of the wash. So on the north side, there's that nice little asphalt trail. But if you go on the south side, kind of more like we'll call it like the county where the cliff is, if that little park is going to be connected to that maintenance road for future trails for the city. Because I know that's been discussed as a trail system through that trail master plan. And then also, it's the same kind of area. If you go towards, I think the street was on the county side, Gerd or something like that, Glen Road. If there's a possible connection to that through a gate or a maintenance road, that you could you could go through that and into the county area. The reason I ask that, I have a mother-in-law who owns a house over there. And the benefits of going from Wild Rose over to Corona Shopping Centers through a pedestrian access. And I'm not sure if those roads are private on the county side, but they're there. It'd be nice to kind of be able to traverse back and forth through biking or walking or shopping or whatever. But anyways, that's my question. I don't know if it was answered. I couldn't quite see the.
It was not, but we certainly could discuss that with the developer when they're up.
Okay.
Yep, thank you. And we do have Mr. Joe Morgan.
Good evening, Joe Morgan, 2063 Ren. Had to peel off the other shirt. I was wondering if there's been any discussion about the location of this immediately next to Interstate Freeway. Many localities, it's a well-known, very well-known, basically it shortens the lives of the people that live there. The particulate and the soot and the pollution is a very distinct problem for residences within 500 feet of highways, heavily traveled highways such as this one. And a lot of localities require increased filtration, better sealing, basically to improve the HVAC and the sealing of the houses to try to combat it. Basically, they're sort of covered with soot all the time. So it's heard about it from AQMD plenty. It's PM10, I think it is. The smallest ones, basically from tires and, you know, and all the exhaust soot. So we're basically building this right on top of I-15. So, and we don't do that very often. I mean, since this has been a known thing, we haven't done a project that I know of that's like this, that's right on top of the freeway like this. So, you know, I'm curious if given any thought. I raised this when when they shuffled around all the plots and the densities a couple of years ago, and it was supposed to be basically elderly housing at the time. If there's kids living here, it is a very high risk of respiratory disease, very much elevated risk of cancer. It's nasty. It's bad. It's against state law to build a school in this kind of an area because kids might be there during the day, during traffic. So I really struggle to see why we should be building housing this close to it. Seems like there should be another more use where people aren't living their lives within feet of an highway. So thank you very much.
Ms. Capilla, are there any other speaker cards or written comments?
No, Chair Sequelan, we have no other comments or written.
All right, and I believe we have the applicant here tonight, and there were some questions from the commission.
Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Brian Milich. My company, Pacific Ventures, is the manager of the Bedford Arantine Hills community. We're not the owner, but we are the manager. We were brought in about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years, to replace the New Home Company as they focused exclusively on home building, and our expertise is in master plan communities. So I won't bore you with a lot of details, but since I haven't been before the commission before, just a quick update. In the last almost 2.5 years, the builders that we sold land to in the first phase have completed all their sales. So that neighborhood is up and going along with the rec center there. We've completed land sales in phase 2 to 5 guest builders, and actually 4 guest builders in phase 2. And they've started construction on models and their production homes. So phase 2 is moving along. Phase 3, we call it phase 2B, is the project before you tonight. And we've completed construction of the bridge to that site. The site actually has already been graded, not to final grade, but it's been rough graded. We provided dirt to the Bedford Marketplace. They needed dirt for that project, and so we agreed to lower the site somewhat, and so most of the site has been graded. There isn't a whole lot of grading necessary. And then we're starting the planning of the last 2 phases of the project. They'll total roughly 500 or 550 homes, but we call that phases 3 and 4. So there's been a lot going on in the time that we've assumed responsibility for managing the project. In response, and I'm happy to go into any questions you have and anything else, but again, I'll wait for you to ask. In terms of the commission's question, really the condo map simply allows, and condo ownership simply allows Bedford to meet the minimum lot size requirements in the city of Corona, which are 7,200 square feet. So we have lots smaller than that, but they're not fee simple lots, they're condominium lots. And what we're doing in phase 2B is pretty much identical to what was done in phase 1 and also more recently in phase 2. So that's the purpose of the condo map. In terms of some of the other questions, we at this point are not intending to connect that Blufftop Trail to the maintenance road that goes down to the Bedford Wash that we've built a portion of already, and we have more to go, because we don't own that property anymore. That was given to the county flood. So we're probably not going to connect that upper trail down to the wash. There is a public trail through Bedford, even though it's a gated private community. There is a public trail, comes down Bedford Canyon and Clementine Roads and runs along the northerly side of the channel. So there is continuity for people to walk, ride bikes, and go through the community, but we're not planning any trails on the southerly side, at least at this point. There are no connections to the neighborhoods to the south. We've sort of understood that they want to kind of be on their own over there, and plus, again, we have private streets, a homeowners association, so it's really not very conducive to having traffic through the community, although we have allowed a property known as the McMillan property at some point to potentially have access through the community. And I think that might be it. We do have to put a noise wall, a 6-foot noise wall, as Ms. Yang mentioned, along the I-15 freeway. And so that will be constructed as part of the development. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this project or the overall community or anything else that I might be able to answer.
All right, Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, thanks for coming in, and
Absolutely.
Welcome to the neighborhood, I guess.
Thanks.
I guess my question is the bridge, and it goes along the line, and I wanted to thank Mr. Woodward for contacting me about the project. We have a trails master plan in process, and so it's important that we don't continue past practices of letting development build over natural trail access ways. Where you have the circle there at Bedford and Hudson House there, and the bridge extends south there to PA 14. And my question is, once the bridge, which looks level, Mr. Woodward gave me a copy of what he took when he was out there on the trail. How does that extend? What's the slope as it accesses PA 14?
So
From the bridge that is existing now over the Bedford Wash?
So the bridge that we're just completing construction will connect Bedford Canyon Road and Hudson House Drive into Phase 2B. So it's a private, it's like the streets in Bedford, it's a private bridge, private street, connecting onto the private streets. So we're connecting private streets on the northerly side into Phase 2B.
And maybe you could explain a little bit about the slope from the bridge up to PA 14. Could you remind me how low PA 14 was dropped with the dirt transferred to the commercial?
We dropped it, I want to say 8 or maybe a little bit more. Was it 13 feet? I'm trying to remember. 12 feet.
12 feet.
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
So once it was dropped 12 feet from the ridge of the retreat area, the county area, how far down from their ridge does that make PA 14?
Well, now you're asking me a question I don't have the answer to. I don't know if Doug Staley is the president of Hunsaker, our engineer, and maybe we can scrounge around and try and get that information for you.
Because I perhaps before your time, remember the marketplace, Bedford Marketplace came before us, and there was quite a bit of interest knowing the dirt was transferring from PA 14 down to the commercial area, and they had concerns regarding the build up on close to them. So I was just trying to figure out what the height difference is going to be from there.
Between PA 14, our site, and the Glen behind us.
County.
I don't think it's a huge difference. There's quite an area of open space, and there's a big a drainage ditch that separates the properties. And again, we're not proposing to connect, but the actual difference in elevation, I don't know offhand, but again, we can certainly try and get that information for you. Absolutely.
Okay, you answered my question, so you're not considering along the trapezoid channel up there in the back on the south end of the build, you're not putting any type of trail system up there?
We're not. The trail that we're putting in will run along the bluff top above the Bedford Wash, and it will connect around to the detention basin that's kind of on the southeasterly side of PA 14, and then kind of loop back.
Is the asphalt path goes around the basin currently?
Yes, there'll be asphalt around the basin, and then there'll be either a natural path or a DG path along the bluff top. It'll probably be a paved path. And then there's an emergency vehicle access that crosses the bridge. So we have essentially 2 points of ingress and egress across the bridge. And then people who want to come over to PA 14 from the other side can use the bridge and then connect up with the trails. Again, we're not bringing the public into PA 14. It would just be the homeowners of Bedford.
So from Bedford commercial build, the construction there was a 14-foot sidewalk trail in front of the marketplace there. And then we had a discussion, I remember, about how it would hit the circular area and then the gates.
Yes, and there will be either a gate that is unlocked during hours that the public would normally want to use the trails, or there won't be a gate at all, but the public will be able to come into Bedford, the community, and use the public trails. We'll have it signed, and those trails will run in front of Bedford Marketplace. It'll come through around the roundabout into the community. It won't cross over the channel, but it will run along the northerly side of the wash. That's a public trail, and then it'll loop back out. It'll be a full loop into on Clementine Drive.
If it doesn't come across the bridge, how does the public get to the maintenance road, which is on the south side?
We're not proposing to do that. Again, we don't own the channel anymore. That's owned by the county. So our trails on PA 14 are just private HOA lots, trails, and we're not proposing to connect down to the channel.
Okay.
On the southerly side. We're running along a public-private trail along the northerly side of the channel, but not on the southerly side, the area you're speaking of.
In the area that you are talking about for the future, which is further west, undeveloped land there, but you were talking about continuing the trail there.
Correct.
See, you understand where I'm going from? We have this
Yeah,
disconnect
absolutely. And we're not maybe as plugged in as we should be to the city's plans. We understand that the city is working on a master trail plan, but there is, I guess, potentially the opportunity to connect up to the public trail easement that goes through Bedford. How that would work and, if that would work, I really don't know. We've not been approached by the city to discuss extending that public trail. Right now, it's essentially down either Bedford Canyon or Clementine, and then along the northerly side of the channel. So I do understand, I think, kind of what you're asking, and we're more than happy to discuss a potential trail connection to the west if that's wanted. The one, I guess, concern that we would have is, again, we have a private, quote-unquote gated community. And so we're trying to manage the homeowners' expectations with regard to, the public being able to come through the project and the public's expectations. And so we want to make it all work. So we'll have signage and things that will, kind of delineate between the public use areas and the private use. But all the recreational facilities, all the other open space areas, and the streets in Bedford are private and paid for by the homeowners association.
So for a potential homeowner who would be living inside the community and would be interested in the trails, I could see where you cross over the bridge and on the south side of, and perhaps it's your two lots there, I think it's lot J and E, where you talk about open space. Perhaps have some type of a mini trailhead or just an open space with a bench. Mr. Woodward was sharing with me, and thank you, by the way, for reaching out, that perhaps there could be a minimalistic type of open space for not a true trailhead, but perhaps just some staging area, if you will,
Right.
for the trail, would be my one comment.
Okay.
I did have a question regarding the site map, and I don't know if we're talking about that part yet, the precise.
Well, let's keep them separate. Let's
Okay.
just work
Thank
through
you.
the TTM.
All right, then, let's see here. I had a question about lots 10 and 11, the spaces there.
Can somebody bring up an exhibit so I can see which are 10 and 11? I don't know them off.
Well, just in general,
Okay.
we could talk in general.
Okay.
You have 10 and 11, and then 13 and 14, it's split by segments of what you're calling parks. Parklet, I think was the term. It's interesting that between the lower two, there's this width, there's this acreage, and then in the middle where 10 and 11 is, it's a half of that, and then it opens up again. And I imagine.
Exhibit 11
Oh.
on page 1. It might be good to bring
You
that
bring
up,
it
because
up.
I think,
I need an exhibit.
since there'll be,
Thank you. Thank you, and they also put it up above. So if you could see between the three housing areas that you have lots left and right of the park in the middle.
So lots C and D.
Correct, C and D. So you have B up above at a certain width. You have C in the middle with a very narrow half of the width. And then you have D, which is wide again. So it just stood out to me that that C should be as wide as the other two. You have housing lots 95 and 79, I believe. And I understand why it's little, because you wanted to put two more housing condos in there. But it seems out of sorts that it should be just as wide as the other two park areas above and south of it. You have 118 condos, and it'd be great to maximize park space versus a parklet walkway.
Do you want me to respond, or?
Well, yeah.
Okay. I absolutely hear what you're saying. I would respectfully maybe disagree a little bit that I think it adds some interest to the way the community is laid out, but I would also point out that the specific plan allows 147 homes on the site. We're proposing 118. And so I think, our parks are exceeding what was originally, we've got 0.54 acres. Originally it was 0.3 acres. We've got extensive open space. So I think having a linear park that sort of varies like this adds some interest and isn't just an area full of grass, if you will, and
And you get
stuff.
two more units out of it, I get it.
Absolutely. Again, I won't deny that we get more density, but we are building almost 40 units less than, or 30 units less than what's allowed. So it's actually a pretty low density community.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'd like to follow up on that a little bit. Yeah, I was looking at this specific plan, and from what I can see, actually, that, this land is actually approved for 167 dwelling units. So I guess I'm curious why you would build less.
I think it's 147. Is that specific plan is 147, I believe?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So anyway, but whether it's 167 or 147, we believe that in this area, because of the views, because of the neighbors, and just trying to get the right mix of homes, different product in the community, we felt this was an ideal place for a little lower density, much more similar to a standard detached single-family home. So we went with two programs. One's a 50 by 80 foot lot, if you will, and the other one is 47 by 80. The 50 by 80 has a single-story home that, again, our market research tells us that people, especially in this area, are looking for those. And then we went with a little bit higher square footage than we've had in some of the other planning areas. So it wasn't maybe entirely altruistic that we went with lower density, but we thought it really started to balance out the community. As you may know, Phase 1 and Phase 2 has a fair number of attached units, and we also have some detached units in both of those neighborhoods and will in the future phases 3 and 4. But we did feel that this was an ideal location to have two neighborhoods, lower density, and fewer units.
Okay. I'm wondering if staff could actually pull up the Arantine Hills specific plan, and so we could, because I'm curious just to understand exactly where Phase 1 and Phase 2 are, that you're referencing. I don't know if that's something we can.
What number is that, Sandra? What number is that?
Yeah, that's great. That'll work. So when you're talking about Phase 1 and Phase 2, which you said were sold recently, all the builders had sold all the
In Phase 1. So that's where our current main rec facility is. It's sort of in the central location of the community. And that's all of the homes are sold to home buyers, so it's fully occupied. Phase 2, which is towards the Bedford Marketplace, has not homes have been sold, but not in all neighborhoods, and none have been closed yet. But we do have different guest builders building on 6 different neighborhoods in Phase 2.
Yeah. So on the diagram, the map there, which parcels would be Phase 1?
Can I direct the Planning Commission to Exhibit 14 on the precise plan staff report? If you look at that exhibit, it is labeled on it. Exhibit 14 is the Bedford Trails and Public Access exhibit. I did not include a slide in the presentation, but it is in your staff report.
Yeah, I see Exhibit 14.
Okay.
I think we may have an exhibit in our PowerPoint if we want to try and bring that up.
So you'll see Phase 1 is the area that has the notation track 37030. 393 units was approved for that phase. That is the first phase, and that runs along Clementine Way. Phase 2 is the adjacent track with 490 units. So that is under construction right now. And then Phase 2B, which is tonight's proposal, is south of that, south of the wash.
Okay, thank you. So do you maybe Ms. Yang or Mr. Eastman, when those two tracks, the 37030 and 37644, with the Phase 1 and Phase 2, do you know roughly when those were approved by the commission or council? So it was a few years ago?
Phase 1, I believe, was around 2016. Phase 2 was in 2019 or 2020, around there.
That's
okay.
Yep.
So I guess the other thing when I'm just trying to square this all with the specific plan, because there's a 2012 version of the specific plan, the original one, and then it was amended, I guess, in 2015. Which mostly kept the same number of dwelling units, but just kind of shuffled the design of the plan around. But now it seems like we're not building up to capacity, So those two, Phase 1 and Phase 2, were built or being built at 883 units versus the 935, I think I've counted, that they were approved to in 2015. And then tonight, we're also being asked to reduce the number of units here. So I'm just not clear, why that's being proposed, and why we're not building to what the plan called for when we have such a, drastic need for housing. We talk about that, almost every time with the housing element. And so that's just, maybe I'm going a little far, from this specific item, but that's kind of what's informing my questions about the specific plan, how that relates to this.
Would you like me to try and respond? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we did not plan, if you will, Phase 1 or Phase 2, but you're right, Phase 2 is at 486 units, not 490. There's more open space in Phase 2 that used up a few lots. In Phase 2B, as I mentioned earlier, we believe that this site is more conducive, meets really what the market wants in terms of homes being detached. We're trying to provide a mix of homes. We're trying to maybe soften the way Bedford looks a little bit and make it, some of the buildings, especially in Phase 1, we thought were not excessive, but we thought we could do it maybe just a little bit better with a little different density in the project. The specific plan allows 1,621 units. At build-out, will probably be at 1,550 plus or minus. Don't know what that number is going to be quite yet, but that's probably about where we'll end up.
And then I guess getting back to this specific item with the tract map and the lots with the subdividing of the parcel. So you were calling these condominiums and having shared common space, I guess, and exclusive use space, because you're saying the zoning on this requires a certain lot size, and
I believe citywide, the minimum lot requirement is 7,200 square feet.
for single-family homes.
Right.
So instead of building condos and calling it a condo, it's like you're looking for a loophole or something?
No, this is exactly the way the commission approved Phase 1 and Phase 2 with the single-family homes. It was always planned this way. So again, we're kind of being criticized for not enough units and maybe too many. And so we're simply trying to meet the market demand, build a community that certainly we'll be proud of, and we hope that you will be as well. And we're in every way, shape, and form consistent with the general plan, with the specific plan, with all of the environmental documents that have been done. And we're trying to be sensitive to our neighbors, because there has been concern over the years of what was going to get built on Planning Area 14, and we think the single-family product probably works better for them as well.
Commissioner Woody, the Arrington Hills specific plan allows for both types of products to be built. You can build a fee simple lot, with lots like your traditional single-family home, but the minimum lot size would have to be 7,200 square feet. You can also build condominium homes as well, and so the type of product that is being proposed tonight is currently an allowed use under this specific plan.
So I would like to clarify too, because sometimes there's some confusion between a single-family residence as we envision it or think of it from a design perspective, and what a condominium is, which is often envisioned as one building with multiple units in it, like an apartment. I just want to be clear. A condominium is an ownership context by which is dictated by the Subdivision Map Act. When we talk about a detached single-family residential house, that is a product type. That is a design. It's not a legal description per se. So I don't want to confuse the fact that one can't be the other. So we do have here a detached single-family residence. It is a building that looks like a small home on a small lot. But it is in fact, and it is, the exclusive ownership and the space in the building is dictated, of who owns it is dictated by the condo map. So there is ownership here, just like someone would own a condominium. But there is common ownership throughout the condominium map. So it's really just a different legal context of how to create that space. As an example, they could have done, theoretically duplexes and had connecting walls, still call it a condominium, but have a bigger size building. We call it a duplex, not a detached single family. So that'd be an attached single family. So I want to make sure we don't get too caught up in the verbiage per se, and I want to make sure that we understand the condominium is the legal process by which you create ownership, and we call it that. And in this particular case, it does allow for lower ownership area, if you will, through that legal process, versus if it was fee simple land, we would have a minimum lot size of 7,200 square feet.
So one of the things that I've been trying to figure out here is, from what I saw, at least according to this specific plan, that parcel is zoned as medium density residential. So is that correct, or has that changed since?
I'll let the project planner comment on that, just to be accurate.
The zoning has not changed. It is still medium-density residential, and under that zoning, they are allowed to build up to a certain amount of units. And so the project tonight is consistent with the zoning of the specific plan.
And so then, even with medium-density residential, there's still the lot size is still required to be a minimum of 7,200 feet?
That's only for fee simple lots. So this project is not proposing fee simple lots. It is a condominium development. So there is a difference.
Okay, I'm not sure
It is, I will say, it is hard to follow when you have in your head, your mindset of what a condominium is. And in this particular instance, you can have a large lot that the lot and the land of that lot is owned by, say, 10 people.
Right. No, I get that. I get that distinction. I guess I'm trying to understand, the lot size required.
Understand.
So she was saying if it was, what did you call it? What was the term you
If
used?
it is a fee simple lot, then each unit or each lot has to be at least 7,200 square feet. That's each unit would have a lot size of that size.
Okay. But this is not considered that because it's a condo development.
Correct. All the yards, which are also called exclusive use areas, are technically commonly owned.
Sure. Sure. But, and so what's the difference of, potentially of construction? How are we, by scheduling it and planning it this way, are we, losing units? Because it seems like we're just kind of combining two things, and I'm not quite sure.
To your question of whether we're losing units with a condominium map, no, we're not losing units. In fact, you couldn't get as many units with a fee simple development. So this is allowing for the developer to develop the lot closer to the maximum units that would be allowed under the specific plan, which is entitled and allowed, and this is an allowed process and allowed land use, et cetera. I would say, and I was not here when the city adopted the criteria of the 7,200 square feet minimum lot size, so I don't want to speak on behalf of why the city did that. I'd have to go back and do research. But I can tell you that when you do a fee simple lot where everyone owns their single property, if you don't have a minimum lot size, for instance, you could end up with very small lots under one owner. And sometimes over time, those individual lots aren't maintained. in a common way, because there's no requirement necessarily for a homeowners association or things like that with a fee simple lot. And so many times a community will look towards allowing for smaller ownership lots to create affordability, but to ensure that there's common maintenance, common ownership, wherein everybody has a stake of the lot. So sometimes cities will approach it that way, to where we'll have the fee simple lot is of a larger size than what you could get if you did a condominium map. Again, I don't want to speak on why the city has it this way, because I was not here, but that is just a common practice. I want to say it's a common practice. It is a practice that occurs in some cities for that reason.
Okay, thanks. That's a good explanation. I don't have any other questions at this point.
Questions? I want to, although we haven't spoken about parking, I had some parking-related questions. I understand all the units have two-car garages.
Correct.
They are close together. Do we know if the driveway depth allows for driveway parking?
It does.
It does. So there really wouldn't be much street parking room.
There will be some, but
Limited.
it'll be primarily the garages and the driveways.
Okay, and as such, this commission before has asked questions about usage of garages and access, and it seems like this is a tight street system, and I could see access and flow becoming potentially a concern or question. So are there any requirements that the garage be used as a garage, much like we've asked on previous projects?
I don't know what the city's requirements are, but our CC&Rs, our covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and our parking program are extremely focused on that issue. We have a parking patrol. Periodically, they will check garages, make sure the cars can be parked in the garage. If not, there's a citation. There's an entire process for exactly the reason that you're mentioning, to avoid having problems as the community grows. Absolutely.
And that would be part of the CC&R?
It's already part of it, and yes, we are not changing those at all. In fact, we've actually strengthened those specific requirements to avoid future parking issues.
Right, because there is no guest parking. Guest parking would be on the street, which it would appear maybe there's one car every other house, something.
Yes, in this neighborhood, that is accurate. And in Phase 1, there's a fair amount of parking at the Hudson House, our first main rec facility. But for the most part, you're right, the parking is on street.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then also as you come off the bridge, I believe it was Exhibit 14 or 13, as you come off the bridge, it shows that street parking is going to be allowed immediately when you drive up the hill after leaving the bridge. It seems like that's very dense and tight driving into a neighborhood. And I'm wondering if there was consideration of making at least that area no parking, or at least doing something to limit parking at almost a choke point driving into this community.
I will certainly defer to city staff on whether or not they would want to make that change. We're somewhat indifferent to that. We want to get as much parking as we can on street for the reasons that you mentioned earlier. But if the commission or city staff said, you know what, that is kind of tight, and we had to paint it red in that area, put no parking signs, we certainly would do that.
Okay, and then the last item I had is tied back to Commissioner Alexander's question about access. So the bridge has a 28-foot emergency access lane, and the documentation here says that also provides pedestrian and bicycle access. So I'm clear. If I live in this community, I have complete access to Bedford Shopping Center through bike lane, through the bridge, and exiting the trails. Is that correct?
There's not a direct connection. No, you would go on to Bedford Canyon Road and then turn into the Bedford Marketplace.
And I could not use the emergency access road that's colored on our landscape map?
If you're a member of the public?
No, if I live within this.
Yes, no, you absolutely could.
So that is fully, that emergency access road
Correct.
is fully open.
Yes,
To the residents
Right.
of this community.
Yes.
All the way down to and across the bridge.
it is.
I believe it's it's for walking and pedestrian. I want to make sure the access is not for vehicle use.
Right, I'm sorry, yeah.
I just want to clarify for the record.
Right.
Non-vehicular
Good
access.
point, good
Right.
point.
Okay. Questions, any further questions?
At the south side of the area, the commenter mentioned about the county area and the road there. Is is there going to be a wall separating this? I know there's that trapezoidal culvert or
Yeah,
whatever.
the drainage. No, we're not planning a wall on our property boundary. We will be landscaping it in a way that would make pedestrian crossing the property line along that difficult, if not impossible. But we're not proposing a wall there. We will have walls on the units that back up to that area and to the street, but we're not proposing a wall along that perimeter.
So the homes that are on the south side, they will have a wall, for their backyards, is what you're saying?
On our side, is that what your question is? Or are you talking about the neighbors to the south?
No, I'm talking about within your community.
Yeah, I think that's the wall exhibit. I don't know if you can see it, but that'll show what our current proposal is in terms of which lots have walls. So we have perimeter walls essentially throughout the community along the edge, but we're probably not going to carry that wall all the way past the detention basin up to the southerly property line. As I say, we're going to probably use landscaping as a better buffer between the two neighborhoods.
So on that diagram where it has the blue around the whole thing, it says cable barrier fence. You're saying that may not be there because you'll have landscaping instead?
If you read the small print, it says at developer's option. So we're still debating if we're going to put that cable fence. It's a 4-cable fence, and we're debating if it's really necessary to put that, given all the walls that we're going to be building otherwise. There'll be a fence around the detention basin to keep people out of that, and a series of other walls. So we're trying to, again, balance this so it doesn't, effectively look like prison's an overstatement, but we're trying to make it aesthetically pleasing as well. But again, we want to make sure that we're sensitive to our neighbors.
Well, I'll fess up, Phase 1. I was one of the big critics, not only for the density, but the look. So thank you for coming in and putting together condos that look like single-family homes. I really love that look. It's very homey, and it's less of Phase 1. So I like that look. I can appreciate the neighbors. I think the drop between the county area and the grading, the rough grading that came down that many feet is somewhat of a buffer for that. I think the one comment that Mr. Woodward made to me, because he's been heavily involved in the trails plan with Ms. Coletta and Ms. Turner, rather, and the Parks Commission, and their public outreach, is that the flood control is open to having a pedestrian trail on the south side. I'd really like to see that happen, at least have a discussion in that
Absolutely.
direction.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that, and those are all my comments.
Thank you.
Any further questions before we close public hearing?
I do. I'm actually curious. For the pedestrian access, is that included in the CCNRs, what you were mentioning about being able to walk over and not? The only thing I'm thinking of is, I know Skyline has a big problem with just cars parking along the side and trying to use the trails. What type of protection would be there for this development here to make sure that they're not inundated with so many cars and people that are trying to cut through and use the trails?
Well, the public cannot drive into the community. So the only people that can drive into and through the community currently would be the homeowners at Bedford. So I don't know if that's your question, but the public, you know, I think there may be some trailhead parking, if you will, at the Bedford Marketplace. There was discussion of that some time ago. I don't know if that's the case or not, but the public that would be going through Bedford, again, down Bedford Canyon, along Hudson House, the northerly side of the channel, and then Clementine, those would be either pedestrians or bicyclists.
It's a gated
Gated.
community, right? Yeah.
On the north side of the wash.
And I can remember us having long discussions about we asked for specific parking for trailhead or whatnot. And after looking at it, there won't be designated, but the number of spaces is over what the commercial needed. And for that reason, there wasn't anything designated, if I recall correctly.
Right, it wasn't, the traffic analysis showed that there was enough excess on the commercial lot to provide public parking.
Yeah, I do remember that. And I know my previous work experience was HOAs, so I know violation letters and all that good stuff that comes along with it. So I'm sure it's going to be regulated, but just wondered if that information was on the CCNRs.
It is. And we actually somewhat recently changed management companies because we just felt that we could get a company that would do an even better job with the rules and all. Again, I'm sorry I didn't prepare better for some of the things happening in the community, but what you'll find is, and it kind of answers a little bit of the condominium question, there will be extensive recreational and open space facilities. We still have to build, or are going to build, a dog park, another pool and rec building center in phase 2. Then we're planning yet another pool and recreation building in phases 3 and 4. And then there's Clementine Park, which will have its own set of amenities. So one of the things that not having individual fee simple ownership allows us to do is to use the benefit of having all these people pay for really extensive recreational facilities. So in the community, we're going to have, I guess, 4 pools, 3 recreation buildings, a dog park, and then Clementine Park, in addition to the trails and a host of smaller open space lots that will have various facilities.
What do you estimate that timing to be? I think you said phase 2, you'll be doing other parks. We're in phase 2 now.
We actually just got permits, I think, today for, it's called The Shed. It's a fitness-oriented facility. The Hudson House has several pools and other facilities there. That's kind of more generic, if you will. In phase 2, we've got the dog park that we have started construction on. That's on right above the channel on the northerly side of the channel. In phase 2, I believe we got permits today to start construction of, again, what we call the Shed, which will be a recreation building of, I believe, 2,400 or so square feet, another pool, a lap pool, but with some other elements in it, and a variety of other facilities there. So to answer your question, the dog park should be done within the next 4 months, and we're going to open that early. So we're going to subsidize it because the HOA can't afford to pay for it yet, but there's so many dogs and people wanting to use a dog park, we're going to open that early. The Shed will probably take us close to a year to build. So somewhere around this time next year, we hope to be able to open that rec facility, and that is available, as is the Hudson House now, to anybody who lives in Bedford, and it will remain that way. Phase 3 and 4, we're just about to start the entitlement process, and with that will come another recreation center and Clementine Park, and I would say those facilities are a good 3 years, maybe a little bit more off. We have to do our best to try and time bringing the facilities on with when the HOA can actually afford to pay for those facilities.
So PA 14, even though they're at a distance, elevation-wise and distant-wise within the other phases 1 through 4, they're still going to have full access to all of those
Absolutely.
amenities that you've...
Everybody who lives in Bedford can use any of the facilities that are available. And that's why we've tried to make them a little bit different with a little different focus, so that people that are more interested in yoga classes, fitness, those types of things might go to the shed. The Hudson House may be used more by families, although I think the shed will be as well. So we're trying to meet a lot of different needs and make the facilities a little bit unique so they're not just the same throughout the community.
I visited the Hudson House, and it's well done.
Thank you.
Well laid out. Good
We
amenities.
we cannot take credit for that. That was New Home, and they did an amazing job on that facility. And we're trying to do as well on the future facilities. So thank you.
All right, before we close public comment, Ms. Capella, any other requests for public comment or written comments?
No, we did not receive any others.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close public hearing. We'll bring it back to the commission for any final public comments or a motion. And let's start with the tentative track map 38277 first.
So I was just going to ask, are we still going to be asking potentially other questions about the second item for the,
Well, I think we did. We went through that. I mean, certainly we can, but, I'm sorry?
I spilled over, sorry.
Yeah, I think we,
okay. Well, because, yeah, I mean.
that's fine. We can do
No,
that.
we
Let's
can
start
talk
with
about
the
it.
tentative track map. We'll work through that, and I can ask if there's any other questions, and then we can take that as second item. So let's start with just the TTM at this point. Any further comments? Do we have a motion on the item?
I motion to approve TTM 38277.
I'll second it.
All right, and the item was seconded by Commissioner Alexander. If we could please vote. And that motion passes. So the next item is the precise plan PP 2022-002. We did have public comment on this item. Do you have some further questions, I believe, then?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily questions as much as just discussion.
Comment? Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. Then open for comment.
Was there public comment on this item from the public?
We worked through that. If you have a comment about the item.
Well, I'm concerned about the parking, you know, which you brought up, just because some of these homes are rather sizable, you know, 4 bedrooms, 3,000 square feet, and with just two dedicated spots. And I know they will have driveways, but, you know, I think there is a big possibility of street parking and there not being any guest parking. And I mean, I know you brought up, you know, the idea of CC&Rs that you know require garages to be used for parking, and we've done that before, and I think, you know, that for me that's something that needs to be, you know, for sure part of this. But I'm also unclear about the whole trail system. I mean, I think I agree. I want to keep access to the trails that are, you know, on the far southwest side of Bedford, and I'm not up to date on all that. So I don't know if this project, as before us, needs any modifications, you know, to you know help make that happen.
Well, with that, do you have a proposal? Is that what you're saying?
Well, as far as the trails, I'm asking, you know, to hear maybe Commissioner Alexander's thoughts on it.
Well, I'm not opposed to put a condition that we have the applicant open discussion with the county flood since Mr. Woodward has attended those trail master plan meetings and has been in contact with Parks Commission, and perhaps condition that the applicant at least host meetings to be open to that and see which way this project could benefit the trails versus take away from it. I would be open to something like that.
Well, with that, I can open public comment if you wish. Mr. Milich is here again, if we want to go that route.
Yes, we certainly wouldn't object to further discussing, both with the city and county flood, a connection. I've got an exhibit here, but it's probably not worth showing you. But there is connection from the east. I believe it goes under the freeway, connects into the public trail through Bedford, as I've mentioned, on the northerly side of the wash. And if you'd like us to look into potentially making that, I don't know if you're talking about a public trail or a private trail, but again, we can certainly engage in whatever discussions you feel is appropriate on that. Again, our only concern would be controlling the public access through the community, because we've sold homes to 393 people, and we've showed them the public trail access easements through the community. And not that that can't change, but we don't want to create an issue for the commission and for the city where suddenly the homeowners say, well, wait, we were told there was just this public trail. So how that would work, I probably can't answer tonight, but we're more than happy to.
No, I'm not
to engage.
expecting an answer, but you had stated, I believe, that you were unfamiliar with this endeavor the city's been going through for the Trails Master Plan.
Right.
I would hate to think that this build would be another disconnect when we have an opportunity to create that access.
Yep, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, and that's kind of my concern too. I mean, if we approve this now without having that finalized, I mean, are we potentially shooting ourselves in the foot and blocking off a trail? I mean, because it's definitely happened in the past multiple times. So.
And my thought is more of, if during that discussion, my hope would be that if Riverside County Flood is open to a pedestrian walk, that doesn't invade the privacy of these homeowners who are buying into a private, those who already purchased into a private gated community, if there was a way to do that, at least hold a discussion would be my point.
You know, an example of that, without holding a development in a application that has a lot of effort's been put into it, what I think in general is a very solid application, there could be some requirement in the condition that an evaluation of access to our existing trails program be a condition. Now, is that a complete binding requirement? No, but that could be language added as a condition that work take place.
Correct, because a lot of effort and money has gone into by the city for the Trails Master Plan for that very reason that Commissioner Woody spoke of developments negatively impacting trail access. If we're going to brand ourselves as a city of trails, then we better live up to it. So that would be my comment.
Mr. Eastman, is that something that could be?
Yes, so I don't, excuse me, I don't want to create the condition by which you would impose on the applicant. I would just simply say this, is that, one, there are things we can't control. For instance, we can't control county flood. Like, that's their property, and we can't impose a condition that can't be implemented because we don't control the property they would connect to. And we do have a specific plan that was adopted that is in good faith what they're moving forward to implement, right? So there's a trail that's already been discussed and adopted. So keeping those two things in mind, things do change. As was indicated, we are now working through a trail master plan effort, and there may be some benefit for the community to do that larger connection. So if you choose to draft a condition, the condition should be specific in terms of the actions the applicant shall take to show good faith effort. It shouldn't be ambiguous and left to interpret. So if you have things you would like the applicant to do to show good faith effort to move forward to consider connectivity, I would encourage you to be clear in what those actions are before the applicant can step away from that condition, if you will. What does he need to do to fulfill it?
That's fair.
Thank you.
I understand that. Thank you. So I would think having a condition that the applicant meet with Dr. Turner and her team, and to become aware of the Trails Master Plan and where they're at with it. There's lots of public meetings that have taken place and dialogue that has taken place, for the record. And if Riverside County Flood Control in a public meeting has been open, said they were open to that possibility where it wouldn't be a negative impact to the owners, then I would think that meeting should take place.
Would you then need to have some sort of outcome from that? So if you had, anyone could have a meeting, but would you want to, what would be the outcome that determine if it could interface with this project? That would.
Well, to Mr. Eastman's.
Specificity to what we would want
To
to see.
Mr. Eastman's point, though, that all the parties aren't here. We can't dictate with outside entities. So it's just more of an education, and if there is a consideration to re-examine the trails on this project, then to do so.
I would also encourage the applicant to reach out to the county to identify whether they're even willing to create connectivity.
We'll start that tomorrow.
And Mr. Woody, was there a comment regarding parking? Because from my standpoint is this design, the precise plan, the 2 garage parking spots, CCNRs are in place already for existing owners. There is enforcement factor already factored into the CCNR, and so they do have the teeth to enforce it and get compliance. And I would imagine this new ownership on PEA 14 would be the same. And so the driveway, being able to access another 2 cars, that's potentially 4, in my opinion, that's good enough.
And if I can just make one quick comment, I apologize. But Mr. Staley did mention that there is the ability for on-street parking between most, maybe not all, but most of the driveways. So there will be on-street parking as well in front of some of the homes. So I don't have an exhibit that shows that, but there will be on-street parking as well.
Is there anything in the CCRs pertaining to if somebody were to throw a party at their home and pulling a permit for additional parking or anything like that?
Well, they would simply need to find, it would be guest parking, and they would simply need to be able to park somewhere. There's nothing that precludes somebody from having guests, a number of guests, and parking on the street. So there's not a limit if maybe that's your question.
And I don't remember the specs on the street width as far as 2 parked cars and then the access to the driveway.
The documentation says it met that.
Okay, and that's good enough for me.
What I'd like to do is close public comment because we reopened it and then bring it back. So I'll close public comment, bring it back to the commission for any final comment or a motion along the lines of that conditional.
Yeah, I'm not clear yet how, what we're, I'd like a little more clarity on what we're saying we would do with the trails thing that we were just talking about. So I'd like to hear, that one more time.
Well, so the first item discussed was that the applicant would meet with the city team and educate themselves on the Trails Master Plan, number 1. Number 2 is to attempt a connection with the county flood control to determine if that could also be tied into the Trails Master Plan. And then with that, determine, based upon that information, if there could be any relevancy of the trails to this development. Requiring anything in a condition with the information we have beyond that, we couldn't require that.
So is it the trails, is there currently, like along the wash, is that considered a trail?
That's county, and that is not a,
And on the south side, it's just a gravel park maintenance, county flood
access
control
road.
access for maintenance also.
But on the north side of the wash?
North side is the sidewalk of already the two phases that the infrastructure's already set up.
right, which the applicant stated that's part of the actual full development.
But it's past,
Public.
it's not really accessible to the public, is it?
It is,
It is.
yes, that is the public.
From the shopping center?
That is the one that we discussed in the shopping
Okay,
center.
okay. And then, so the thing with parking is, with these houses being that large, I was looking up other homes in Corona, and it seems like starting at around a little over 2,000, when you get to 2,300 square feet, most homes seem to have 3-car garages, because I think when you're getting to 4 bedrooms, there's an understanding that you could have 4 or 5 drivers living in a house that size. And so, certainly when you get up to a 3,000 square foot, we're talking homes that are going to be, over $1 million easily, and, with a 2-car garage. So I know the applicant was saying that the project was market-driven and what the market wants, but I don't think the market wants a 3,000 square foot home with a 2-car garage. But, that's I don't care what he builds, but it just seems like we're creating parking problems for the people who end up living there.
I do understand your comment and concern there. After looking at understanding that there are CCNRs that control it, the fact that there is on-street parking, the fact that there is a 2-car garage, this development actually has more parking than the other development that we approved a year and a half ago where we had similar concerns. I don't think there's an excess amount of parking, certainly. I think to your comment, if there's a party or something going on in the neighborhood, it's probably going to demand a lot. Beyond that, you'd be reducing units even more, and we would have even less density in a development when we do have concerns about lack of housing. So to me, it's that delicate balance. I think they've done the best with what they have. I don't know if I'd want to see group parking areas in this development either. That doesn't seem to fit what I think the site plan would want.
And I look at the other projects that we have approved. We're always having our eye on parking. But if we're targeting this project and we haven't been consistent with other projects that are similar, I think we're getting into some hot water there. I think that I like the condo looking like single-family homes, anticipating 4 cars for a household. I don't think we can hold any applicant to 5 or 6 cars. I just think that's unrealistic to be able to accommodate for that. And they actually do with street parking for on their space and street parking.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I'm just, this project is a lot for all of us to digest, getting it a few days ago and having to work through it all. And same as the other project we had, up on Skyline, that was a, big drop on us. And so, I guess just I'm not always comfortable with, planning had this for 6 months, the letter from the applicant was in May, and then, so they've been working on it for 6 months, and then, it's kind of like thrown at us and to
Sure,
be
I think it
comfortable with
falls on us. Our responsibility is to, with the information that we have and our ability to have questions answered and to form an opinion that brings a consensus about an action we take on the item.
The one thing I do actually am pretty troubled by is the wall along the freeway, the 6-foot wall. I was looking at the sound studies, and I think some of the assumptions in that are a little lenient, and I think there was actually the previous study from the original approval of the specific plan. It had higher levels of sound than the most recent one. So, I would potentially like to see a little higher wall, at least on the segments of the development that are closest to the freeway, the higher parts. That's kind of my concern.
Well, I saw the email of the information that staff provided at 3:20 was your original email, so there wasn't any time for me to digest whatever was responding back. I would like to ask Ms. Yang if the sound wall 6 foot is consistent with other builds that are that close to the freeway, and what your thoughts are about meeting that standard.
Well, every project is different. It really depends on how far or how close the units are to the freeway. So the height of a sound wall will vary depending on the project's location adjacent to the freeway. For this particular project, the noise analysis recommended a 6-foot high block wall. So that is what staff is recommending.
I see. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the freeway level is where it's at. This is raised up from that level, plus the 6-foot wall. Because if I remember correctly, the slope of the bridge going up to PA 14 is quite a slope. So there is that difference. It's not equal playing field with the freeway level. And my comment would be that it is market driven. And someone, just like if someone doesn't want to live next to a convenience store or a gas station or any of these other things, they're not going to buy. So they do have choice to buy there or not. And this isn't, to someone's comment about we have a lack of housing. We have plenty of houses. We don't have affordable housing. So that has always been my point, and these won't be for affordable housing. I'm okay with the sound wall as it meets specs.
Any further discussion or motion on this item?
Well, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve the precise plan as presented, and that would be my motion.
In that motion, are you acknowledging the condition of approval that was discussed?
With the condition of
Could
approval
you
with the
outline
three,
that?
correct, with the three specifications that the applicant meet with staff so that there can be a discussion and education on the Trails Master Plan. There could be an assessment as to how this project fits or benefits that master plan, and if there are some changes that can be made that could benefit the city and that master plan, in addition to contacting county to see if there could be a discussion regarding their property and the flood control for trail access.
And you're comfortable with staff crafting that condition based on that?
Correct.
Okay. And then you did have a previously discussion about evaluating constraints to the connections after that discussion occurs?
Correct.
Okay. We can craft that condition. I can read you a context of one if you want now, or we can just do that based on statement.
I think we all pretty much understand what the specs
Based
are.
on statement is acceptable.
Will the commission be notified what the status is, or just an update? How does that work? So we put these conditions, how would we know that?
These conditions would move forward with the track map to city council, so these would be added conditions based on the planning commission
With
comments.
feedback as well?
Well, once we draft the condition and it goes to the city council, that's the condition. So that was in part why I wanted to know if you wanted me to read you a kind of a framework for it.
Yeah, so you would, what you're saying, Mr. Eastman, is we would be able to confirm through the recommendation to city council that those conditions were met as discussed tonight.
Yeah, you could do that. If you'd like me to do this, I'll briefly state this.
Go ahead, sure.
That the applicant shall in good faith consider and an expansion of the trail system to the south side of the wash by meeting with the city's community services director to discuss the trail master plan and county flood control, and to evaluate constraints of the connectivity.
Fine with me.
And we can provide a little bit more wordsmithing that's kind of on the fly.
Sure. And so that's the motion you set forward, Ms. Alexander?
It is.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
And we have a second from Commissioner Sherman. Please vote. And that motion passes. Moving on to written communications, has the Planning and Housing Commission Secretary received any written communication from persons providing information or seeking action by the Planning and Housing Commission? Ms. Capella?
Chair, no, we have not.
Mr. Eastman, any administrative reports for us this evening?
Yeah, you all should have received an email from Director Coletta regarding the housing element rezoning program and objective design guidelines, which are out there. So give you an opportunity to look at that in advance because it is a lot to consider. So I want to make sure you all receive that and to remind you to take a look at it. And then also let you know that the city clerk did receive an appeal for the telecommunication monopole that was denied at the last meeting. And so that will move on to city council. I do not have a date for when that will move on yet. That needs to be scheduled by the city council, but I would suspect that'll be early January, given that it's too late for the first meeting in December, I think, at this point, to write a report and get it on the agenda. And we have no second meeting in December for council.
Great, thank you. Any members of the Planning and Housing Commission have any matters to discuss this evening? All right, thank you. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 12th, 2022. Thank you and have a great evening.